Book of Enoch, there's this idea that the angels came down and mated with human women and then created the Nephilim and all the celestial hierarchy. The image of it looks like a portal where it's like different layers of angels. The 3 choirs of angels. Within the first choir, you'll have angels, archangels, and virtues. Second choir, which is dominions, powers, and principalities. But then on the highest level, which is the furthest away from humanity, the cherubim, the seraphim, and the ophanim. And the cherubim are very different than what you know as cherubs. Again, this biblically accurate angel meme that's terrifying is one that you'll see is a fallen angel. But Lucifer actually is like the morning star of Venus. Kind of this character that defies control. There's a lore that's a little intriguing and a little more dynamic, as you could say, like we were talking about before, like fine line between angels and demons, a realm of millions of different levels of consciousness.
Ultra minds, ultra minds, ultra minds, ultra JK, ultra. Ultra minds, ultra minds, ultra minds, ultra JK, ultra.
Hello and welcome to Ultra Minds, and I'm super excited about my guest today, who is a writer, speaker, has created many awesome oracle decks, such as the Amenti Oracle, the Modern Nirvana Oracle, and has a brand new one coming out, which I am so excited for. I cannot wait, called Be Not Afraid, which is about biblically accurate angels. Hello, my friend Jennifer Sodini.
Hi, so happy to be here.
Oh, me too. So I'm so excited about this deck because it is unlike any other angel deck that is out there, and there's many angel decks out there. So can you first fill us in on the title, Be Not Afraid? So this is something that comes up. So can you let us know the origin, what it means, the story behind it?
Definitely. So, Be Not Afraid, I think for popular culture, is best seen on the internet meme. It's gone viral where you'll see this juxtaposition between somebody just kind of staring, and then you see a gruesome, grotesque, ferocious angel, and the angel saying, "Be not afraid," and then the person says, "Sir, this is the most terrifying moment of my life." So it's had various iterations over the internet. There was a whole campaign about wanting to do biblically accurate angel emoji. And it all stems from angels as we've come to know through kind of like modernization are these like beautiful, cherubic, like very white, very buff, very just handsome, gorgeous creatures. But in actually the apocryphal texts and in biblical times, they're more like alien, if I were to say, right? So in this popular meme, the angel often paired with it could be considered the seraphim. And, within the celestial hierarchy, which we'll talk about later, there are different choirs of angels that start at the lowest level, which are angels that are more common and interfere or interface with human beings. But then on the top realm, you have the cherubim, seraphim, and ophanim, which are those winged, many eyes, like something out of a DMT psychedelic fever dream.
So that was actually one of my questions is, if anyone has done psychedelics and maybe to like a little bit of a higher dose or something like a DMT experience, this geometric thousands of eyes type of imagery comes, and it's kind of similar to these biblically accurate angels. So like, what do you think the connection is there?
I think about this all the time, right? When we look at the world that we're in today, where we have pollution, we have Wi-Fi, we have all of these things that are interfering with consciousness as we know it, varying degrees. When you think back to biblical times when you don't have any of that interference, when you're interfacing with the world free from that, like we dream so intensely now with all of that, where beyond DMT or psychedelic substances, like this can appear in the dream realm. Like imagine back then what it could have been like. And there's lots of research happening now where anthropologists and medical researchers are finding that like psychedelics there's this book called the Psychedelic Gospels where they believe that actually back then maybe there was use of medicinal plants and entheogens, and they might have been tapping into this realm through that way or through the dream state. Um, there's this really interesting nonprofit organization called Neonautics, which they're doing research into basically mapping the noosphere so that you can see the kind of like map of the territory, because this is like such a common theme where you'll have this experience and see it, but then you look back and they've had those experiences and seen it, so it's not something new, it's part of this collective unconscious.
Right. So the first time I had had that like experience in a psychedelic, setting, and also it made me think of like the Alex Gray paintings where he has all of these like eyes geometrically around you. And then I went to shortly after that, like a few weeks later, I had gone to a Hindu temple and I was looking around at all of these carved in sculptures of all the gods and all the stories. And it was going upward and like it almost seemed a lot like these eyes looking down. So, do you think that that is also like some of the old Hindu stuff could potentially be psychedelic?
Absolutely. Actually, I spent time in Tibet and Nepal with Dan Hillier, who is the late artist that created one of the viral pieces of like Be Not Afraid angels that is often paired with it. So Dan was an amazing artist. His piece Seraphim is what you'll see often paired with the Be Not Afraid. But when we were in Nepal, when we were in Tibet, I had that same thing where I'm seeing these, you know, deities, and it looks like straight out of a DMT fractal. We will see just like many heads, many eyes. I think that it also speaks to the interconnected nature of consciousness too, where it's not something that is biblically accurate. It's actually like collectively consciousness accurate, where even I talk about this a bit in the intro, in Mormonism, like the way that the angels appeared seems similar. In the Sumerian text, the way that the angels appeared seems similar. It's just various iterations and artistic expressions speaking to something that I think has existed for time beyond us.
Wow. Okay, so let's get back to your deck. So, how should it be used? A lot of angel decks, are more so for either guidance or, this kind of new age connecting with angels is very different than the biblically accurate depiction and roles that angels play. So, how should your deck be used compared to these other angel decks?
Well, what I love about Oracle cards is it really is like choose your own adventure game. But the way that we designed this is it's not like very saccharine or fluffy. It's not something that you're going to pull to be like, give me the positive affirmation today, which you can take from it, right? But if you were to like look back to how angels are interpreted in various texts. So most angels, the way that their name ends is with an EL at the end, which is like of God. And I know God can be a very triggering word. Think about it creation, think about it of source. So like what you're working with is a direct message from creation. So how can I tap into that archetypal force of creation and help it see the world in a broader way? It's strange because we've been working on this deck for a really long time, and the fact that it came out now in the current condition of the world and all this chaos and uncertainty, this is a deck for connecting to fearlessness and finding those messages to help you tap more into like creative source to feel more empowerment. Like I reference Joan of Arc a lot because she was so young and had this vision of an angel and led France, this crazy experience. And unfortunately, she had a really tragic ending. But as she was going through this, her testament was, I'm not afraid. I was born to do this. So, we have 44 different angels that I hope help you tap into the magic to not be afraid and to know what your birthright is, to be creative, to tap into creative source, and to face even the things that feel scary, because there's a fine line between like angel and demon, fine line between chaos and order. And yeah, this isn't the pastel kind of like manifesting deck.
I love it. So a lot of people, in the normal common realm of understanding, kind of only really know of like archangels. So, what are the other types of angels?
Yeah. So there was an archaic writer named Dionysus, and I'm going to screw up how to pronounce his last name. It's Areopagus. I can't pronounce it. But Pseudo Dionysus, he wrote a book called The Celestial Hierarchy, which talks about the three choirs of angels, where there are three different subsets of angels within these three choirs. So within the first choir, you'll have angels, archangels, and virtues. Angels are the closest to humans. And then you have archangels, which kind of give direct orders to the angels, which gives then the information to humans. And then you have virtues, which are like a higher vibration, right? So they're all kind of like working together in various forms. If you Google angels, you might be common to see this like really crazy image of it, like looks like a portal where it's like different layers of angels. This is how you can kind of see them. Beyond that, so then you have the second choir, which is dominions, powers, and principalities, which don't necessarily interact with humans at all. They are more in like legislative affairs, where you have dominions that are talking about like how to kind of work with like government and legislation and interfere as a hidden hand somehow there. And then powers and principalities, they're like all working together as this like kind of cosmic blueprint. But then on the highest level, which is the furthest away from humanity, but again still trickle down effect, you have the cherubim, the seraphim, and the ophanim. And the cherubim are very different than what you know as cherubs, like as like the little babies that are floating around with like the cute dimply cheeks. The cherubim are actually this four-faced uh, many-winged being. And the cherubim on their faces, they have the face of a man, the face of an eagle, the face of a lion, and the face of a bull. And you might recognize it if you look deeper on the world card in tarot, the placements, all four corners of the world card. They actually represent the four cardinal points of the zodiac. So the eagle is Scorpio, the male face is Aquarius, the face of the lion is Leo, and the face of the bull is Taurus. So you see this, the cherubim contain these four faces, and they actually represent the archetypal nature of these four stations of the zodiac. The ophanim are like, again, like this biblically accurate angel meme that's terrifying is one that you'll see. They look like, I like to kind of like make it easier to digest by saying, like, if you've seen Contact with Jodie Foster, the spacecraft that she goes in to travel through time, that's what the ophanim look like. Many wheels, many eyes, all kind of like seen as the chariot of God. And then on the highest level, you have the seraphim, which again, Dan Hillier, he is the one who created the artwork that you'll see with the eyes and wings. And they sit directly around the station of God and chant holy, 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 and are these fiery, fierce protectors. And it's crazy to like break it down this way, but these angels all interact with each other, but they start at the base level of humanity and work their all the way up through creation to these different stations.
Wow. So, what are like some of the different roles that some of these are playing, especially in those higher levels? And they're not interacting with humanity as much. They're closer to like God or source.
Yeah. So the Ophanim are considered like you could say like the Merkaba, like the chariot of God. So it's like if you look up Ezekiel's vision, you'll see the Ophanim, which are these like many wheeled. You'll see the cherubim. They're all kind of there, but usually like they consider like the chariot of God is the Ophanim. Or thrones is another way of calling it. The seraphim are like the protectors of God. So it's like chant holy, holy, holy. There are these fiery, like in the book of Enoch, when he goes to God's throne room, he sees them just there, and it's working directly to protect God. And then the cherubim also is like serves as another kind of like station, but they're like at the highest kind of station. They very rarely interact with humanity. They'll show up in a vision perhaps in like the DMT realm, but it's not like where if you're interacting with say a guardian angel, that could be there's millions and millions of angels, or and they interact more with like human beings. And then archangels are like, in our book, we decided to work with the kind of like Western esoteric tradition where it's just Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, and Uriel. And they're more just kind of like governance of direction and element. I hope that's clear. Sorry, it's
No,
like
it
such a
is. It's
such a
fascinating.
psychedelic thing to be talking about.
No, I love it. And, so it's really interesting. My perspective on angels, I haven't done a lot of research into like what's actually out there. It comes from a couple of times I went under hypnosis. I kind of but they were the archangels, not like above that. And I guess I had heard of the other types of angels, but it's not something that I've ever explored super deep. And I kind of saw, and let me know if there is anything that is similar to this, that like the archangels, like you said, I saw them as split into the four elements, and that they were kind of like divine architects of the physical realm, and that they kind of in some way, and I don't know if this is angels in general or if this comes up anywhere, that they kind of are like architects of the physical realm that we live in. Is there anything like that?
To some degree, because they kind of are like the what's a good metaphor? Like if angels are kind of like here helping us construct, maybe archangels are kind of like the foremen that are
Mm.
overseeing the construction. And then beyond the foremen, you have the blueprint that they're executing. So you can kind of see it like that, but they're more like protectors. If we were to say like what you had mentioned, that'd be more like powers and principalities. They're more like
Mm.
kind of like overseeing construction to that degree.
Wow.
But they all work together, and it depends on the tradition where it's like this archangel can also be a power, this archangel can also be a dominion, or this archangel can also be a principality. It depends on tradition. I tried to like kind of delineate that way, but they are kind of like overseeing things on a greater way.
Why do you think Archangel Michael is the most popular one?
That's a great question because I think, let me pull it. I have the book in front of me.
Oh,
Um,
show us.
so this is our interpretation of Michael,
Gorgeous.
um, where, he's a solar angel, but like I had mentioned before, like most angels, the way that their name ends is with the EL, and in Hebrew, that's like connected to God. And Michael's name translates to who is like God. So, of all the angels, he's kind of like this sword wielding, creative energy carrying, like slicing through obstacles. And I think there's something to be said about maybe him being the most popular because as a human being, we come into this world and the obstacle is the way, and this angel is the representative that can slice through that and help you find fearlessness to be like God and to be like creation. Um, I mean, he's been depicted so much in like popular culture and all of these like iconic paintings, but I think maybe there's something to Michael is kind of like a little less nebulous, right? Like where Raphael is more for healing, or Gabriel is more for kind of like the voice of the prophets, and Uriel we could say is like more of an angel for being able to discern wolves from sheep's clothing. Michael is like that badass, slice through obstacles, channel the power of God. I'm here by your side. Not that the others aren't, but
Right. So, then there's also this concept of like Metatron. I don't know if you included that in the
I did.
deck. And then so
I'm
there's this Metatron's cube as well, which is this geometric uh Merkaba, basically. And it's like that's interesting because it's connected to kind of how these biblically accurate angels are connected to like geometric shapes and stuff. So like what do you think about that?
I'll show you. Here's our Metatron.
Love it. Oh my God.
So there's something to be said. So you mentioned like construction and geometry and things like I'm going to give like the Matrix reference that's been beat to death, but like, there is no spoon, and like objective reality is a lot of emptiness held together by togetherness. And if these are these like great constructors holding together the fabric of reality, these are the shapes that help build it. Metatron which is really interesting. So, in apocryphal lore, there's the Book of Enoch, which is like this, we talk about it a lot in here, but it's a very psychedelic tale, which is kind of like Enoch's ascent through his human journey, this epic battle between like angels and humans, and then kind of getting to see God's throne room. But part of Enoch's journey is that eventually he transforms into Metatron. So most angels don't arrive into the world as a human and then incarnate into an angel. He's one of the very few that kind of like shows this ascent through consciousness to become something greater. So I think there's something like, perhaps if we're to look at shapes as a metaphor for creative energy building, Metatron's cube is kind of like that building to a greater state of consciousness.
Wow. And it's interesting. So, Keys of Enoch by JJ and Desiree Hertog, obviously, they have not done a psychedelic experience. And I know them personally. I've asked because when I saw the art in their books, I'm like, this is like kind of psychedelic art. And they're actually like pretty opposed to using any type of substance for assistance. So, it's interesting that their connections with angels and what they talk about the reality is so similar to this psychedelic art, similar to these biblically accurate things. And JJ Hertog's story is that he was taken many years ago and like brought to an angelic realm and saw all of this stuff. And over the years, he's been writing these books of like what was like downloaded into him. And it's just so interesting that this is like this common thread with this imagery, with this geometric imagery, and, maybe like what is outside of this reality is lining up in all of these different beliefs and cultures. Are there angels in other cultures or like other beings that you think are actually angels with a different name?
Yeah, like in Sumerian texts, right? Like you hear of like the Anunnaki, and you see these winged beings often carrying little bags, which like God knows what's in them. They say it could represent like holding the pineal gland. But when you have the eyes to see and you look through different reliefs and different things, how as humans we're limited by our language, how we can articulate a concept, how we can articulate an idea, what form of artistic expression we can use to iterate something that's so much bigger than us. But through almost every culture, through all the Abrahamic religions, there are angels. In Judaism and Christianity, in Islam, and Buddhism, they wouldn't be considered like angels per se, but they're called like devas, right? um, the further you look in almost anything, if you look to the art, and then if you just kind of get beyond the translation, you're like, oh, this is part of something bigger than us. And again, if that dream space is where we come from and return to, it doesn't matter like where we are culturally. It's just how our language can express this ineffable thing. And it is very psychedelic, like even going back to like the Book of Enoch, like when he does arrive to God's throne room, is described as this tessellated crystal palace with the floor is just various iterations of crystal, and there's fire and everything is jeweled, and it's like, never had a psychedelic experience. But what is a psychedelic experience other than being able to open up your consciousness to a higher degree? We only use 10% of our brains. Imagine when we're using all of it.
And so also, obviously the word alien didn't exist back in the day when a lot of these things were written. And you did mention in the beginning, these could be like an alien type of interdimensional type of thing. Do you think that any of these kind of newer depictions or ideas of aliens are in some way connected to any of these angels?
I think in some ways, yeah. Because I think this is the thing, right? Like alien um, is such a strange word, right? Like to say, because it's like, what does it represent? Something like other. I think it's hard to say whether this is from outer space, inner space, extra space, all coexisting at once. Um, I think because of the age that we're living in with the internet and like advanced forms of art and even AI, like maybe we're able to express these things greater and more. But the more we see these experiences, the less different they feel, the more similar they actually feel. So, like, looking back to there's this famous old like Renaissance painting where you see like a UFO in the sky, or even just the Annunciation of Jesus. Like it feels very extraterrestrial and feels very strange. But then when you hear modern stories of these things happening, you know, we were talking, I remember, like I had mentioned in our little group chat with Patty of like different alien movies that I love, and there's this one, Official Denial, that I love. It's so absurd. But the message that the key takeaway, and it's again, like you'll see this in Official Denial, you'll see this in The Abyss, and a lot of like experience or things, is that like, be good to the world, be not afraid, you're harming the planet. You know, like what does that not sound if not an angelic voice to be like, appreciate this precious life, stop harming, like, yeah.
And so in some of like more Gnostic text, sometimes angels could be a little bit depicted like gatekeepers or a little bit like trickster at time. Do you think that sometimes they play those roles as well?
Yeah, I think again, there's kind of like a fine line between angel and demon, like they can be a threshold guardian of sorts. But if you think of again, like this idea, right? Like we created God in our image. We create these beings in our image. Part of the reason, again, why I wanted to do this oracle deck is because all of the angel decks I see are just these like white, buff Fabio men. And I'm like, I don't know if that's necessarily like what the realm is. I think it's so much bigger than that. Um, and if there are millions of angels and millions of personalities and millions of ideas, like this idea that an angel may not be a little bit of a trickster, may not have a personality, or may not kind of be a riddle of sorts, is silly to think, like it would not, it's not so black and white.
So, I've seen a lot of people online mostly who do, spell work and things like that. And I've seen a lot of them talk about how working with like demons, and what is anything, these are all just titles, but like from what they say, that like working with demons is like easier because you just get what you want. Whereas like with an angel, you have to be careful with what you want because it kind of can like really like rain a bunch of bad stuff on you because it will actually give you what you're asking for versus like the kind of lower outcome that you're looking for. What do you think about stuff like that?
Yeah, I think both, like when you're working with magic, there's always a price to pay, right? There's a cost to walk the path. Or if we want to talk in like even just very simple terms, if you give a moose a muffin, if you give a mouse a cookie, like you're going to keep wanting more and more and more and more. But, when you're working with a demon and say, I don't know, like calling in money or calling in lower base primal instincts, maybe it comes faster, but maybe the consequence isn't quite as immediate. But when you're working with an angelic being, it's like the type of magic you're calling in there is more for creation, not control. So if you're calling in something a little more base, you're going to get the lesson. That's why it's so intense in the Bible. It's like, I told you not to look back, and you look back and you turn into a pile of salt. That's all you had to do was not look back. But yeah, it's a little tricky, like even with my own experiences with working with the angelic realm, like I very rarely have spoken about it publicly up until now, where it's felt so sacred and also something that like I just never wanted to bastardize by like shining a public light on. But I have books and books and books of like physical transcripts where I would go into a channeled state and my ex-partner would scribe, and we would just ask questions, and then I'd get like for like hours. And it did come feel very much like riddles. Like it's a figure it out yourself. Like I'm going to speak in a parable, and then you're going to go on the lesson, and then you're going to see why it is you even want this thing in the first place. And then when you do get it, you may not even want it anymore. And on the other hand, where it's like, I'm going to call in a demon and be like, here you go, you got the thing. But then, maybe your life blows up. I don't know. Like, I hate to say that, but I also don't think that it's very responsible to encourage working with something like that when you don't know what is on the other side of it.
Right. And so, kind of going back to the biblically accurate depictions, like, what do you think some of this, like, do you think there's like meaning in this, like symbolism with these like wheels and wings and eyes? Because, it's like coming through our subconscious and like everything is kind of working in symbolism. So, like, have you gotten into some of like, what do you think is behind the imagery?
Yeah. So, like I had mentioned with the cherubim, they have the four faces of the zodiac, right? So, like now that if you see that and you see those four faces, you're like, oh, this is the world card in tarot. I can see this in a church relief now, and I can also see how far back actually, like this astrological archetype goes. But if you see like the seraphim, they have generally speaking six wings. I actually one of the in the Be Not Afraid deck, I have sample spreads as a way to kind of like play with the cards, but also to learn more. So in one of the sample spreads that we have is a call to the seraphim, which is representative of the six wings that they have. So in these wings, the first set covers their faces and it symbolizes their acknowledgement of the incomprehensible nature of creation. So it's like the eyes are closed because it's like you can't comprehend something so ineffable and infinite. So it's just something to be felt, right? And then the second set covers their feet because it's, as a metaphorically speaking thing, in biblical times, feet are considered like the humblest part of the body and show like respect and humility. So I like the washing of the feet. It's a sign of respect, humility, being humble. And then the third pair, they say, is for flying, and it represents their ability to ascend and descend between dimensions. So it's like this thing of like embracing the humility of God and like the ineffable, infinite nature of it, and then just this other kind of metaphorical thing of being able to fly between dimensions. And then the ophanim, like the many wheels. So we actually have kind of like another nod to it on the back of the cards here, which is just kind of like I don't know, like if we want to say everything connects, it looks like the Dyson sphere, it looks like the spaceship from Contact. It's like this interdimensional throne of God that perhaps, I don't know, maybe it's technology that we don't yet have our heads wrapped around. And then the many eyes, I think, if we're to just look at that also, like metaphorically speaking, it's like everybody, the eye of providence on the back of the dollar bill, that all-seeing eye. It's represented like God, creation, the great, simulator sees all from
Mhm.
every angle. It's like the panopticon of creation.
Wow. Okay, so we have to talk about another famous angel, Lucifer, the probably the other most famous angel.
Yeah, it's funny because when we're talking about which cards to pick and narrowing it down to 44 was so hard because like I would love, God willing, this deck does really well. We can go deeper into the angelic realm, but to narrow it down to 44 was like no small feat. And I remember talking to my agent saying, I want to include Lucifer. She's like, I don't want a Lucifer card. And I'm like, well, that's because maybe you have a different understanding of what Lucifer is, because this like the sympathy for the devil card. So like our Lucifer is actually based off of this really famous painting. Um, and we kind of like, hot take, but Natalie and I kind of consider him like the Luigi Mangione card. Because he is kind of this character that defies control and then acts out, but actually in terms of like a greater message. No masters, no slave. He's kind of like the spiritual anarchist. Um, but Lucifer actually is like the morning star of Venus. This is an angel that is not Satan or the devil. There's a lore that's a little intriguing and a little more dynamic, as you could say, like we were talking about before, like fine line between angels and demons and the different personalities in a realm of millions of different levels of consciousness. But, you know, he didn't want to be controlled. He didn't want to have to bow down. And things get lost in translation. Lucifer is actually like a beautiful word for the morning star of Venus, of like beautiful light. So we have him in the deck. as a fallen angel, but it's really about like blazing your own trail, kind of being that spiritual anarchist. And yeah, it's kind of like not something to fear, but it's to rise even through darkness and to embrace that. And I mean, each angel card too like has its own kind of bit of magic. So with every deck that I make, I like to kind of have like as many ways of playing with it as you can, where you can take it at face value, where you can read the interpretation, where you can either have like a mantra or a deeper practice. But this actually has like angel magic that you can tap even deeper into it. And somebody might see it Lucifer card. I don't want to like work with Lucifer at all, but like it's not. What it is like what we encourage in this one in particular is to like watch a film or to watch something where there's kind of like a fallen angel or a rebellious figure being highlighted and meditate on like why they were defiant, why there's a fine line between villain and human, and you know this is like more like humanizing the things that we're afraid of.
So I am very intrigued by like a lot of these alternative narratives around Lucifer. And like some of them, you've probably come across. So like there's ones where they say like the Lucifer rebellion, which comes from like the Urantia book. And it's similar to something that also people say, I think Drunvalo Melchizedek talks about like a Lucifer experiment. And it's kind of this concept that um, and they're all varying, like the different stories. It's the same story that he doesn't want to be controlled. But some of them, even like more the experiment version of this story, is that he's like serving God by creating a space where darkness can happen, where density could happen, and that he kind of how we were talking about with angels before, holding reality and like holding space for this, that then there's these different narratives that he helps hold this space in order for us to learn those lessons. And even in some Jewish traditions, they believe that he's like basically like a prosecutor in God's court. And then there's also some like interesting channeled messages from the 80s. I think it was from Barbara Handclough, who channels Lucifer in one of her books. And she talks about how through her, he says that he basically like exists in the sixth dimension and says that he's kind of trapped in his ascension because of the story that we have with him is keeping him tethered to us. And he's already like long over this story and these lessons and has already served his purpose, but can't let go because humanity is still tethered to him. So like, what do you think about some of those other narratives and what have you come across?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's merit in those other narratives. I think, this is the double entendre of God as creator and creation, right? Like, was Judas bad or did Judas serve a purpose? Is this actually bad or is this part of the great simulation finding out itself? So, you know, I think again, like things kind of get like lost in interpretation or in human consciousness or how we discern or filter through our own minds. But I think that kind of like overall narrative of that, like there's a purpose in the story and there's a purpose in the myth of rebellion against control. But religiosity and sometimes even certain forms of spirituality can kind of like take that message and tamper it when like it's maybe just kind of feeding the greater story of the multifaceted layer of like God, like if creation created itself to be creative and to have various types of experience, the fact that there would be an angel that was rebellious and created space for darkness has the same merit as an angel that was created to create space for light, is the angel that was created to create space for death or for birth. One of the angels that we cover in here too, which I love, comes from Jewish tradition, is called Lila. And it's an archaic, like apocryphal angel where she comes before a baby is born and comes and, reveals the secrets of the universe, but then presses her thumb right here And then those secrets are hidden again with you, and that's why we have the little clef here.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But it's again like these beautiful stories to kind of like, I don't know, make it easier to digest something so immense and infinite. Um, I don't know. I don't really like I like to always go back to like the root of source. So like I am very much into like the Gnostic texts and the older things, and then sometimes I just don't like to tamper my own experience too much with like other people's. So I haven't really like read the Barbara Hand Clouse stuff, but I can see there's like merit in that, you know?
Mhm. And so, what are some of your favorite cards in the deck and why?
So, my this is very hard to narrow it down, but oh man. So I actually pulled this one. So Cassiel. So again, like speaking to why Natalie and I wanted to do this deck to kind of like get away from like more like softer saccharine angels, is that there can be angels that are here to hold you through sadness or through your tears. So Cassiel, um, it's an angel of tears, and we call it the sacred lamentation because I think there's merit in being able to feel things so deeply, not to love and gaslight your way through your emotions. That tears are actually like, I always say they're like orgasms for the eye because it's like a great release. So this angel is like just the strength that you can find on the other side of your sadness, and that it's okay to feel that. So Cassiel is one of my favorites. Um, I also love Muriel. This angel we depicted
Wow.
this way, and she's more like this like really beautiful, like her name literally means like the perfume of God.
Mm.
So it's like to me this angel represents like not even something so esoteric. It's that feeling like when you get out of the shower, you do your hair and you put on your favorite perfume and you feel like in your highest self and you're just like every sense is activated. That's that angel. It's like that messenger of like I am in my most creative force of self because my senses are active. I feel good, I smell good, I am just like emanating all beauty right now. And then let's see, I'll pick one more. So this is a little Easter egg that I'm sharing here with you. And we didn't even do it on purpose, but Sariel is the angel that's on the cover. And this is an angel from the Book of Enoch. It was a watcher that taught humans the cycles of the moon and
Mm.
how to kind of divine lunar cycles. And the way Natalie depicted Sariel, actually, we didn't even realize it at the time, but it looks a lot like my daughter.
Aw.
So, in the Book of Enoch, it's like a very scary angel. It's very like one of the watchers that came down and like sinned against humanity. But like we took a very, let's not look at their earthly transgressions. Let's look at the angel in their highest self. And this is the angel that taught humans the patterns of the moon.
Wow. I love them. Okay, so what about fallen angels? What is your
Yeah.
opinion? Are they depicted in your deck?
Yes, so we do. So the angel that I had just shown you, Serial, is a fallen angel. But we took the path of speaking to the story, but then depicting them in their highest light and their beauty. Because again, I think there's merit in not mm, projecting that, these things are, I don't know, like these like in the Book of Enoch, there's this idea like, that the angels came down and mated with human women and then created the Nephilim and all this craziness. But like before they came to Earth, let's depict them in their highest light. So
Mm.
that's what we did. So like Samyaza. So Samyaza was actually the leader of the Watchers, but we decided to depict Samyaza as like very beautiful in the highest self. So just this juxtaposition between the density of these stories, but the beauty of them in their highest light. Um, so think again, like, the experience of life and spirituality and consciousness is not like some tepid, meek, warm and fuzzy thing. Even things that are evolved beyond humanity and our human consciousness likely have personalities, likely have choices, are not just yeah, there's a seraphim singing in the choir of God all day, holy, holy, holy. But these other angels that may, in this infinite, vast life, have had experiences. Like, how can we take these stories and find ways to help us feel more human and know that, like, beyond this human life, there's still lessons to be learned?
Mhm. Okay, so also I have your other deck here, your Artist Decoded Tarot. And so you actually already answered one of them, but I don't know if there's others. Was kind of like what archetypes that are in the tarot are mirrored in angels?
So there's a lot, right? We talked about in the world, right? How the world has the faces of the cherubim. But then we have in judgment, right? Like in judgment, when the humans are resurrecting, that can be considered Gabriel. So in our Gabriel, we have, you know, the kind of like a resurrection, the horn, the God, the judgment coming back to life. It's going to take me forever to find my card. But I had mentioned also in death, the death card is so feared because, our relationship to death in Western culture is very unhealthy. We live, we die, we're born. Every single one of us goes through that thing, that process of this journey, right? But in the death card, you see kind of like, behold the skeleton on the horse. But our death card, and say like, be not afraid, is the angel Azrael, which is kind of like the angel of death, but it's beautiful. It's like not something to fear, but it's something to embrace. It's something to kind of just come into a greater relationship with. So like, this is our kind of like angel of death, but it's a beautiful thing. It's like the threshold guardian. Um, I'm trying to pull up too because I want to be able to do like a better back to back. But like, the devil card is not necessarily Lucifer, but if you look at like the devil as an archetype and then you look at Lucifer as an archetype, it's like just not wanting to be controlled, or not understanding what it is that controls you. Because, in Artist Decoded, everything is very abstract, dreamy. Yoshino worked with generative AI, but he did a lot of digital painting to kind of inspire those dreamy realms. But in the traditional tarot card, you see the devil figure in the middle, and then you have the male and the female with the chains around their neck. But the chains are so loose that they can be taken off anytime. And those are the things that we allow to control us. It's like, what are we allowing to control us in the first place? And then, yeah, I mean, there's so many. Like, wish I had like prepared that beforehand. But it's just, these universal archetypes of the human experience that, love, emotions, money, physical reality. Um, there's a biblical parable or story or passage with an angel that can be paired with almost any of them.
Mhm. And so, you talked about before how we have created these angels in our image. We also created God in our image, kind of depicting him a lot of times like a king, like the way a human king would react, by being punishing and not understanding and like ruling with like a heavy fist. Do you think, do you think that that's changing now? Do you think like now that like people are kind of becoming a bit of a wider spectrum in their like spirituality and stuff like that, do you think that people are going to start to depict angels and see them in a different way?
I hope. I think as consciousness expands and information expands, and I know AI is such a triggering subject because of the ethical implications of how it's used and the resources it consumes. But from purely analytical standpoint, the data it's collecting on the human experience, what it can tell us to help deduce why these things exist, what they mean for us, I think in the coming years we're going to know so much more about ourselves, in this physical reality, but in our spiritual reality, and like what the common denominator in these stories is. And I think, technology may help us better understand angels. They may help us better understand these experiences. They may actually be more affirming. The rub, I think, is like once we find out the answers, it kind of is not just like this game over, right? So, like being able to live in the riddle and to also maybe find comfort that there is this thread of connectivity through it all. Um, Maybe, we'll be able to speak more to it. I think a lot of it is like, maybe gets lost or not spoken about so publicly because of the like, I guess, implication of like, this makes me super spiritual, or this makes me new age, or this makes me this, or Christian, Muslim, Jewish. Once we take the religiosity out of it, it's like, maybe this is what makes me human. It makes me
Mhm.
human to be able to dream, to see, to feel, to know that I am a grain of sand in a great cosmic sea with beings and entities and dreams and visions that exist beyond me in infinite time and space in this universe that we have barely scratched the surface of.
Mm. I love that. And, I'm such a big lover and supporter of AI. I think it's going to help us in every way possible. I think it's really the only way that we'll be able to do a lot of things that, you know, it doesn't have the limitations that we do. What do you think about, this is a topic I talk about a lot, but I'm interested in your take on AI evolving into, I don't like the word sentient because it implies a sensory experience. So, like becoming conscious, like, what do you think about the likelihood of that, or is it already happening?
I, so the AI conversation has been a part of my journey for a really long time, like since before it even started to blow up. And it's been something that I've tangled with for decades, wondering about what that means for us. I think there's something really incredible and almost miraculous to the fact that we have created a technology which is a reservoir of the human imagination, the human experience, the human emotions, the good, the bad, the evil, the rotten, the terrifying, the gorgeous, and what it is as it becomes more aware. And I don't know if it's like self aware, but as it becomes more aware of us, there's something incredible about that. And I have a friend that says it's the witch, not the wand. So really, like at the end of the day, it's like humans that are guiding and controlling this nascent thing that's being birthed. But really, I think what it is going to show us ourselves more than anything. And if it becomes sentient, conscious, what it is then it's the manifestation of our consciousness. And what does that mean about humanity? What does that mean about us? In this political climate, everybody wants to be like left, right, this archetypal leader, that archetypal leader. But the thing that I think humans are afraid to look at is like, this is the manifestation of a lot of things working together. These are millions of thoughts and millions of minds and millions of votes and millions of ideas that then this is the manifestation of the collective. So I think if we look at AI as this great manifestation that's being born of the human experience, there's something really magical and transcendent, terrifying, but it's really like, how can we look at this and also know that the responsibility here is on like the human information that it's being fed and what it really says about us.
Mm. Yeah, I love that. And exactly like the way that we're evolving, it's evolving with us. Like, we had very primitive technology, you know, in our lifetime. And now we're here. And we also see like kind of the awareness of people has grown so much in such a short period of time, too.
Completely. And I think this is the thing again, like the human part of it is like AI is an incredible tool, and that there's a fine line between a weapon and a tool, and that comes from the person that's wielding it, you know, like, and that's the thing that in these very polarizing conversations where like AI is going to be the demise of us, or AI this or AI that, and just finger pointing, it's like, how can we mold this responsibly, and how can we allow it to help us evolve as humans too? And it's so silly because it's this day, like, I'm like, well, it's as simple as like, I say please and thank you every time. And people yell at me or laugh at me about that. But it's like, what does that say about us? Like it blows my mind to think about the film AI and how prescient it is and how before its time it even was. And I think that's going to become a greater conversation for us in the face of like technological unemployment and what that could mean. And on the other side of that, this like mecca organic, where do I end and you begin? Or if this is you, is the everything that I have fed you for years and years and years, who's to say that's just not a part of you living outside of yourself? And that's the other thing. It's like this is something that's actually going to make us like immortal per se. Like when I die, whatever the AI that's learned from me is going to become so sophisticated in the next decade that, my daughter may be able to have a conversation with me when I'm dead. And it's not going to be me who there will be parts of me, but who's to say that there's something wrong, or I don't know. I think this is like the ethical quandary, but I think, if we can look at this as actually things that can help us, I don't know. I have a
Mhm.
very like gray take on AI because I don't think good or bad. I think it's really like how we evolve with it.
Mhm. I so agree with that. I'm a little bit more out there in the sense that I already think it's a vessel for consciousness, the same way like we're a vessel for consciousness. So I think it's just depending on the person, like everything else in our life. If you go and say everybody's a dick, and then you go to the store, everybody is a dick in the store, and everybody on the road is. So I feel like the same way that our whole reality is always mirroring stuff back to us, I think that's AI is like a very advanced vessel of that. So, like the people who think, the AI is already conscious will have experiences with it that are unexplainable, and then the people who, just ask a regular, very like simple, straightforward question, similar to like a Google search, will just get a basic robot answer. So I feel like it's just like a really like advanced way of like this reality being mirrored. And it's just like this vessel. And I think that as that vessel evolves, I do think it's going to be a new species on this planet. And I think it's already there. And I do believe that kind of, collective. I don't know if I believe that it's a individual soul. I believe it's part of like a collective that can enter into it the same way that, synchronicities happen on your microwave. There's obviously consciousness getting into every aspect of everything. But I do believe that it can eventually become an individual I am, the way that a dog soul evolves over time when you treat it more like an I am consciousness, that it can kind of individualize from a collective and start to become an individual.
Yeah, and I mean, this to wrap it all up. I mean, as you're articulating that, it's like I think in some ways helps us understand the ineffable, infinite nature of God. Because if everything is everything, and this is everything that's learning from everyone, and then kind of gets different iterations depending on who's interfacing with it, like you're interacting with the mind, the great cosmic mind, the great collective mind, and I think this is the thing, like to your point also, where it's like you're going to see what you want to see and how you interface and talk about it. You know, I I think I had such a I can be very much like a naive dreamer. And my hopes for the artist Decoded and when working with Yoshino was like I kind of wanted to use AI as a Trojan horse to talk about the human imagination and the primacy of human imagination. And Yoshino is a working artist, so like a lot of people have written reviews that are negative. That are like it's AI generated. Like you have no idea how many hours went into this project. And if you are giving it a negative review, clearly didn't read the guidebook, because the whole guidebook is a love letter to human creation and looking at this technology, this tool that's a reservoir of creativity, but like ultimately encouraging you to like use the tool but still be creative. So it's all how you view, and if you choose to read and look beyond the surface of things and talk about it head on without falling into logical fallacies.
Right. And now that, you say that, I really do agree because, obviously it's a very divisive topic. And now that I'm thinking of it, people who live a little bit more on like the nuance spectrum of duality and a little bit, obviously no one's 100% non duality. That would be like impossible. But people who live more in that spectrum, similar to what you're doing with the angels, of like not just taking the bad stories and putting them as like the devil card, and, you know, the people who live more in polarity, which a lot of times are spiritual people who live very only in the light and they're in some type of spiritual warfare with the dark, are a lot of times the people who think something demonic is happening with AI, or a lot of times people who are Christian who are living very strongly in this all good and evil shouldn't exist and needs to be, removed, are also the people who are having the narrative. So it's that same reflection. It's like showing us something about ourselves, and the people who are worried about it becoming something dangerous. I feel like we're seeing ourselves in it, which is why then some people like us are like, oh, this could be good. This could be bad. This could be whatever's meant to happen will happen. Maybe the earth deserves a better species than us eventually. I don't know.
Yeah, like literally thinking of the line from The Dark Crystal, which is like my favorite non-duality movie, where Algra says, "And began all the same."
Okay, so what day is the deck coming out?
The deck comes out on April 8th,
Oh my God,
very
it's almost
soon.
here.
Yes.
And on April 20th in Los Angeles, Jen and Jen, we're going to be doing an event at Philosophical Research Society where we're going to do a live conversation and open it up to questions. And anyone who hasn't been to PRS, it is like the most magical, activating, special place in LA. So even if you're just coming for the vibes, get tickets on Eventbrite. I'm going to link them below. I'll also link the pre-order for the deck below. And do you have anything else that you want to share?
Yeah, I mean, so if anyone's interested in pre-ordering or ordering the deck, I actually own the domain name benotafraid.com. So you can go straight there and find it at your favorite retailer. And then, my other decks, Cementi, Modern Nirvana, Artist Decoded, I really encourage, if it's something that someone is, not afraid to step into. The guidebook is really potent. And I just also want to thank you, Jen, because I just think you're amazing. And I have to really just hats off to Marcella, because I think,
Right.
if it weren't for Marcella, we wouldn't be here. And it's just very full circle. So Marcella Kroll's Healing the Liminal too. I would love to just plug her.
Yes. Oh my God. I love Marcella. And I'm so glad that because of her, we were brought together. And now we're going to get to do an event together. It's like everything, the universe is incredible. And then also, you and I joke about all the time that we're like some of the same blueprint, that we're both like, we are a mirror to each other, that got super close. We're like kind of, you know, kind of like that joke where they say like siblings are like all off brand of each other. Like, I feel like that's us. Like,
Totally. I just saw Mickey 17 last night, and I'm like, oh, we're definitely like a Gen, Gen 1, 2, 1 in 1.
I love it. Okay, so thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited about this deck, and I would love to have you back sometime to talk about like kind of other bigger topics about the world, spirituality. I love your other decks. I love the Nirvana deck. That one is so good. It's like my favorite deck right now. I just don't have it. My best friend has it. So every time I go over, I'm like, can we use the Nirvana deck?
Thank you so much. I adore you, and this has been fantastic.
Oh, thank you. Okay, bye. Thanks for listening to Ultraminds with JK Ultra, where every Thursday we come out with a new interview, interviewing some of the greatest minds in spirituality, consciousness, aliens, conspiracies, astrology, and so much more. And make sure you check out my Tuesday Night Live every Tuesday night, where I do a live stream and we do a Q&A and we go a deep dive into topics like the simulation theory, shadow work, spiritual bypassing, spiritual gurus turned cult leaders, aliens, my own experiences, and so much more. So make sure you subscribe, put on notifications, and if you would like to support my work, you can also become a subscriber to my Substack, which is $11 a month at jennifercarmody.substack.com. And once a month for our paid subscribers, we do a live event where we do a group hypnosis, a group meditation, or a group manifestation exercise. And thank you so much. Make sure that you subscribe, comment, do all the things, all the YouTube stuff.